All right, on to you, Marisol.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. My name is Marisol. This is my sister back here and my niece, Sophia. They're going to be joining us today. Want to introduce yourself?
My name is Sophia, and I'm going to be an incoming freshman at Washington State. And my major is going to be neuroscience psychology.
It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to meet you guys.
Hello, good morning. My name is Olga, and I'm Marisol's sister. I work at a community college as an academic counselor, so really listening in to see how I can help my students connect and just learn more about opportunities for the students that I serve. I work with first-gen students.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that they could join us today and hear Miri's story. So it is really an honor to have our guest speaker today. Miri Rodriguez is a globally recognized storyteller, head of Global Internship Program at Microsoft, and author of Brand Storytelling. I got the book here.
The book, Marisol!
Great book, writing lots of notes. And so it's been great reading this and reading about how you put customers at the heart of your brand story, really emphasizing empathy within storytelling. And so without further ado, I am going to leave it to you, Miri, to lead us in today's presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marisol. If someone can allow me to present, I don't think I have presenting rights yet, but if someone can share that with me, I'm just gonna, I just want to pull up some visuals because as I tell my story and also share storytelling tips with you, it's really nice to think about just the visual elements of story, which is part of what I talk about. It's important. And so I would love to, as I share with you my story, also share with you the tips and tricks to storytelling, the learnings that I've had in my own path. And this all applies, by the way, this all applies to everything from your personal brand to your corporate brand, anything you want to do. So if you're thinking to be an entrepreneur, if you're hoping to build your personal brand, all of this, it's really brand storytelling. So it works for everything. And my journey has been around this whole idea of personal branding and also helping Microsoft brand itself in a time that after being a tech giant, we found ourselves right in the middle of Amazons and Googles and Facebooks of the world. So we had to kind of rebrand our story as well. So all of this was in tandem, it's happening at the same time. And I was very lucky, very blessed to be part of this journey as I was branding myself. And one of the things that I learned, first of all, that storytelling is not telling stories. So that's something that a lot of people can confuse. I myself didn't know what it was when I started my journey. It really isn't. It's a design approach. It's taking a meticulous thought to the elements, the structure, to the techniques of what storytelling combines, of the elements of story as well. These are the character, the plot, the conclusion. If you're thinking about your own brand, how do you play in this brand? Who are you in this story? Where are the other characters? How does the plot unfold? What are the surprise elements? These are all things that it's not just a once upon a time. It truly is a meticulous approach. There's a science and there's an art. So in these next 20 minutes, I want to take you very quickly. I know we allow time for Q&A, so I want to do that. I just want to take you quickly through my own journey and how I arrived here from Caracas, Venezuela, the slums, actually. Never would I have imagined in my childhood that I would end up at a company like Microsoft doing a job as a storyteller and later on as heading the internship program at Microsoft. It has been a remarkable journey full of surprises, as you can imagine. And in all of it, I see the story unfold in many different ways. And I've been able to kind of piece it together. And so the first thing, again, is what storytelling is not. When I came to do this job at Microsoft and they brought me to Seattle from Miami, they had me do a job. There were three of us, three storytellers. We were basically divided into three sections, what we call functional areas at Microsoft. These are the business functional areas. And so the first one was mine. It was data and AI, and a little bit of security. And so I was brought in from a communications and marketing field into engineering. And I'm not an engineer. I wish I was. Those are cool jobs. But I didn't know what to expect. I came into a space where it was not my space. I didn't speak the language. I certainly didn't look like them. And so it was a very daunting task to be able to tell stories in this space. Of course, I had the hard skills. I'd gone to school for communications and marketing. And I was at the time also taking my master's, doing my master's degree in integrated marketing communication with UX design and design thinking approach. But that's all I knew to connect with them back into the design piece, nothing else. And so I had a hard time. I failed. Actually, I failed for like 3 months at Microsoft. I failed not fast. I failed royally. And I found myself very, very desperate. I was like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? How do I tell stories? Where do I start? And so I got on LinkedIn. If you have not used this platform for your branding, for your connections, please do. It saved my job, my life. I began to connect with people on LinkedIn that call themselves storytellers. These were people in places everywhere, such as Disney, in different organizations and brands, big and small. So we have Disney, Hyatt, Marriott. We have, of course, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. We had producers, singers, poets, all kinds of different people that define themselves as storytellers in a different genre, in a different format, a different industry. And that got me very curious. So I didn't ask him, and I went to interview them all. I didn't ask him what is storytelling. I asked him what is not, right? And so they told me all the things that storytelling was not. It wasn't information. It wasn't data. It wasn't words. It wasn't, it wasn't numbers. It wasn't timelines. It wasn't ideas. It wasn't marketing. And so I was like, okay, if it's not all of that, then what is it? And I found that in my specialty area of data and AI and being able to transfer information and stories that were highly technical, I had to define this for myself. Storytelling, the definition, I couldn't find it online. It wasn't something that I found that was like, oh, this is it. It grabs me. And so I defined it on my own. I defined it as the emotional transfer of all that stuff, of all that information. It was the emotional transfer of data, information, content, right? And it's done through the 3 elements of character, plot, and conclusion. With stories, you probably heard that there's always need to be a hero. That's called the hero's journey. Sometimes people tell you got to tell a story like this. I found in my own journey and in my personal branding journey, we are brought into a society where we are told how to tell things. We are told how to do things, and we don't question it. Nobody stops to say, wait, is that really the way I should be talking about myself? Is that really truly my story? Are those really my values? And so I pause here for a moment. When we think about your story, what we call your origin story, we all have it. We all come from a different place, a different lived experience. All of us are looking at the same content. We're actually consuming it differently with our own biases. And that's great. That's all the diversity, the beautiful thing about being diverse. What it is different is nobody stops to think, are these truly my ingrained values? I had to stop myself from thinking by age 30, I have to do this. By age 40, like who decided that? That I had to be married by age 30, by age 40, I had to be VP. It was all the system, right? And so I had to dismantle my story, create my character, create my brand, not based on what I thought I was supposed to, or society was telling me, or my religion, or my parents, or my friends. It was who I decided I wanted to be in my own story. That is storytelling at the very beginning. It's defining the story and the storytelling, what you're going to tell in the story. So where to begin? At Microsoft, again, I was stuck. I defined it, but I was like, okay, I get it. Where do I start now? Now that I defined it, where do I go from here, right? How do I do this practically? I told you I was taking my master's in design thinking, was one of my certifications out of this master's degree. And so the light bulb went off. I was like, can I prototype stories? Can I use this model to prototype things like stories? And so I called my professor. He said, absolutely, you can prototype whatever you want. And so I did. I went out there and I began to map out how to prototype stories. Now, this design thinking method that I want to show you practically. You can use it today and you can use it tomorrow for both your personal brand or for your enterprise, for whatever you want. This design thinking model is very counterintuitive to things that we've been taught to do, because we've been taught to succeed. And design thinking teaches you to fail. In fact, failing is success. You're going to test and test and test and test. And that means you're going to fail a whole lot before you get it. And that's what happened to me. I failed for 3 months. I failed with our designers. I failed with our engineers at Microsoft. I kept trying to tell stories in different ways. We tried podcasts, we tried interviews, we tried all kinds of different things. And it took me so long to finally get it. I couldn't tell the stories for Microsoft. In fact, my audience was engineers, IT pros. These guys are extremely, extremely practical, skeptical. They are pragmatic. They don't want to be told that once upon a time. They don't want fluff content. They want to get to the point. They want to read. They want to be able to get this stuff done. If you're an engineer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So this was a niche audience that I had. I had to start with empathizing with my audience. I had to think, how do they like to learn? How do they consume content? And I learned after failing so much that I wasn't the person to share that content. If the blog came from me, they're going to dismiss it me. I'm not an engineer. So I learned that engineers wanted to learn from other engineers. I know it makes sense now, but back then it didn't, right? There's a lot of things that make sense when you finally learn it, but it didn't make sense. So I'm going to walk you real quick through these 5 steps, and then we'll allow some Q&As. Design thinking approach for storytelling. The first thing you have to learn is, in order to empathize with your audience, you have to find something that I call a universal truth. Universal truth is simply that emotion, that feeling. Remember, I just said that storytelling is emotional. Good stories are. I mean, we've all been exposed to boring stories, inconsequential. They have the elements, they have a character, a plot, conclusion. They're just boring, right? The good stories are the ones that we think about, that we are connected with emotionally. At some level, it captures our feelings. That's an universal truth. At Microsoft, for example, our story became to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. That was our mission in our story. Empowering is a word that I don't have to explain to anyone here. We all get it. We know what it is to feel empowered or not. Furthermore, to me, empowering means a whole lot something different than it does to you. For me, coming from the slums, empowering myself every day because food was not on the table every day. That's a word that I can attest to. I feel that word differently than you might because of your own lived experience. But the beautiful thing, it's universal. We don't have to explain it. Empowerment, it's a feeling. So you start by asking yourself a question, whether with your personal brand or your corporate brand. You ask, what feeling do I want to evoke from my audience? What do I want them to feel when they come in contact with Miri, with the school, with my brand, with my product, whatever it is? I want them to feel something. It's the beautiful allegory by Maya Angelou. People will remember what you did to them, what you said to them, remember how you made them feel. That's it. That's the magic of storytelling. What is it going to make them feel? Well, how do you do that? You begin to empathize. There's 3 levels of empathy. I'll go quickly. The first one is called cognitive empathy. This is a type of empathy that reminds us all that at the very basic level, the people you're connecting with are humans. So I would actually challenge you to stop calling them students or clients or prospects. If you start calling them humans, you're actually practicing cognitive empathy. Your brain begins to act differently, and therefore you behave differently when you recognize the people you talk to and connect with in your story, whoever you send an email to, that text to, whoever you tweet to, send a TikTok. All these people are human. And for that very reason, we allow, not perfect, we allow things, we allow human condition. It's okay. We don't have to be perfect. That brings authenticity to the story. The second one is emotional empathy. It actually gets a little deeper into the emotions and allows you, as part of the storyteller, to enter that circle of humanity. You don't have to show up primed every single time, every filter, everything that you has to be perfect. At Microsoft, we were like that. We had to be perfect. You would never hear of leaders before coming on and saying, hey, we didn't have it all together. And then we started telling stories. Our engineers began to talk and say stories like the bumps and bruises on the way to the cloud, the learnings we had to go through so that you don't have to, right? We began to get vulnerable and say, we're human too, right? It's not just Microsoft, there's people behind it that can make mistakes and have, and we've learned from them. Here's the stories. right? From the personal brand perspective, it's not just success. We always get so inspired by people's success. They don't tell the crap they had to go through to get there. Sleepless nights and all kinds of haters and whatever it is, right? We love the glory of it. We forget the path, and the path is actually what leads you to the glory. So allow yourself to be human in the story. Be compassionate. The compassion and empathy is even the hardest one. I found through this process by myself, by the way, that I fail at being empathetic. Now I'm better than before, but honestly, I took a test called Clifton Strengths. I don't know if you've heard of it, but personality DNA test, and it has 35 attributes. These attributes are just personality attributes. They're not good or bad. They just are. And empathy came number 33 out of 35, being the lowest. So I'm like, not empathetic at all. So I had to learn, right? I had to learn to get better. I found that it was a craft, that it was a soft skill. So if you're not empathetic, I'm right there with you. We're good. High five. We can work on it. I've worked on it and I've gotten better. I continue to work on it. Definitely not there yet. Compassion and empathy allows you to just recognize your humanity. These have been hard times. Let's just be real. These have been hard times for many levels. For all of us, we are all living an experience that we would have never imagined. If somebody would have called from the future and told us this was happening in 2020, nobody would have believed it. And so all of us have experienced so much. Some of us have experienced death, illness, injustices. All of this is happening. It's real, and we're all experiencing from different places. This empathy just allows us to recognize that hey, we are going through this. I'm going through this. It's okay. All of us, we don't have to apologize for our feelings. We just have to recognize them. I feel like this, and I shouldn't feel like this because I'm not Black. No, if that's how you feel, that's okay. Could recognize that. That's you being compassionate with yourself. When you practice that empathy, you begin to also practice the other two. So now you recognize other people. If you're feeling like this, somebody else may be feeling like that. And it kind of works up the ladder to the cognitive empathy level. And that is the process of storytelling. I know that it doesn't seem like it is, but it is. It begins with empathy. Because then, and only then, can you add that content that comes from the heart. And we can all recognize authentic content. We can all smell the fake a mile away, right? But the content that lands is the content that we go, wow, that story hit me because I know they meant it. That's where it comes from. That comes from the empathy level. After we empathize, then we begin to design, which is the fun part. Empathy is kind of the hard step, the very hard step. And then we get creative with it. We begin to design the story. We empathize, we think about how to we empathize with ourselves and with our audience, and then we define our story mission. What is your story going to go do? Remember, you have to tell it to do something. Who are you dedicating that story to? Who's your audience? What do you want them to feel? And you think about your audience. And I will plug something in here about digital revolution right now. If you think your audience is local, it never is. We are global and digital. So everything you say is going to come up somewhere and somebody's going to hear it, even if you didn't intend to. You didn't target that audience. So always act from the premise, both from your personal brand and your corporate brand, that the audience will always be global, because now we're in the space of digital evolution. Characters, who are they? A lot of people, especially in the Latin community, Latin women will ask me, hey, Miri, how do you get on LinkedIn and just do what you do? We're usually more reserved. It's a man's world in the Latin community. And so we are kind of taught to be a little more reserved and shy and not really talk about our accomplishments. Listen, that's your story. Nobody's going to tell it better than you, right? Nobody's going to talk about your accomplishments. Now, the thing that I've learned about your characters is when you highlight them, people tune into the story even more. If you don't make yourself the center of the story, even if it's your story, then people tune in. For example, I often tell a story about being bullied when I first came to Microsoft. That's a whole other. My dog is sleeping, and he's having dreams. Sorry, but I came to Microsoft and I was bullied by 4 women, and I tell that story not to make people be like, oh, Miri got bullied, but it was more around those characters. What did I do with that? What happened with that? How did I turn that story around? And so think about characters in your story. Think about, if you want to share your wins, Think about the people that helped you win. Success is actually, it's a team sport. You don't get there alone. Somebody changed your diaper. Somebody helped you get to school. Somebody paid for something. You didn't, this is not you didn't get there by yourself. So those are the characters. Who are they? What do they play into your story, right? The plot, many ways to tell a story. And we're going to get into the second one. And finally, the conclusion. What do you want them to walk away? What is that one thing that you want them to go, wow, I got this. I got this. I met Miri and I got this. I met so-and-so and I got this from it. I read that story and I got this. Always start with that. You define those things. Again, at Microsoft, we had it all wrong. Our PC on every desk and every home, that led us through a good few years, runs, right? But the PC became quickly, it was the product. Then we went to empower every person. There's no mention of our products here in our new mission, in our new story. It's about people. We empower people. If a Surface does that, great. If Xbox does, great. We don't care. It's just we exist to empower. And so that's the universal truth. And that's why now Microsoft it's different as a company. I've been there and I've experienced that transformation for myself. And so the story mission really is you defining that. You say, hey, my story is dedicated to this audience, whatever audience that may be. Make sure you add as much detail as you can. Where are they? What is the psychographics? What's the persona? Where are they physically, right? What are they like? It can help them do what? So it can help them do what? What do you want them to walk away with in the story? What is the story going to do for them? And make them feel what? Same thing with your personal brand. You know, a lot of lifestyle brands. Oh, I can help them do what? I want to inspire people. Okay, how? Well, I want to change the world. Okay, how? How? Right? Get prescriptive in your story. How do you want it? And you know, you're not going to reach 8 billion people. I hope you do. But if you don't, you can reach 100. You can reach 1,000. With social media, 10,000. So get prescriptive about your story. Then you get to ideate. This is the fun part. You define your story mission, you define your characters, your plot, your conclusion, and now you're going to scamper. This is a brainstorming tool that I use a whole lot, scampering. As you can see there, it's an acronym. You can use this, you can use many other brainstorming ideas, literally just Google brainstorming tools, and you're gonna get things from mind mapping, to storyboarding, to six-hat thinking, to scamper. You can just take your pick and run a whole lot of them. It's really fun. You ideate ways to tell the story. So you're going to hear somebody tell you, oh, you have to have a hero's journey transformation. No, you don't. Oh, you have to have this. No, you don't. You know your story. You know how you want to land it. You can combine ideas. You can create a new idea. Somebody thought of that one, of that way to tell a story. You can think of another one. Like who said that was the Bible for that? It's not. Right? So ideation is you allowing yourself permission to tell the story in as many ways as you want. We have things called the mountain. We have things called spark lines, the monomyth. I mean, just take your pick. There's a whole lot of ways to tell a story, and none of them are right. All of them are good, but none of them are right, and you have to use them. So create and ideate. How are you going to pull all of this together with the empathy tool in the middle saying, my audience is this, my character is this, my conclusion is going to be this. I want them to walk away from this. This is the storytelling tool. What if I can change the character? What if I modify the plot? What if I replace a character? What happens if I eliminate something from the story? Begin to add layers to the story. Begin to change what you've already created. And then you prototype. Prototype is the ways that you're going to go out and materialize these ideas. These are what I call story concepts. They're not stories, they're concepts, little mini stories that you're going to go test in the market. Can they be a blog? Sure. Can it be a video? Absolutely. Can it be long form? Yeah, it can be whatever you want. You prototype it. You begin to think, how can I tell the story? I began to do this on LinkedIn, by the way. I failed many times and then I won many times. And when I won, I won. I mean, things went viral multiple times. It went trending multiple times. I was like, okay, I got it. I found my own formula with my own audience. My audience is not your audience. So what I do, it's not going to work for you. What does work is the methodology, is you submitting your content, your stories, your characters through this process to fail so that you can find the win. Failing is saying, I didn't get it right this time. I learned how not to do it. One more way to not to do it, right? At Microsoft, we learned no blogs worked, no interviews worked. I'm sorry, none of blogs, no interviews, no podcasts, blogs. These things called pointer blogs. Our engineers like to read. They wanted a 800 pointer blog that led to a white paper or a case study that was like 300 pages. That's what they wanted. Now, we didn't know that. We had no way to find out unless we failed all the time, which we did. And finally, we got it. When we got it, I'm going to give you numbers if you want numbers. We used to get 125,000-ish people to our site. It's called Microsoft IT Showcase, where our content lives, from engineers to engineers. We got over 5 million year over year. No funding, because we didn't have any marketing. It was organic. So it works. When you find the way through your prototypes, when you find the way not to do it, you find the way to do it, and then you win. And lastly, you test it, right? Ask yourself, hey, did the story evoke the emotion that I really wanted? Did it do what it was set out to do? If I wanted them to be inspired to do something, did they do it? How do you know they're going to do it? Because it's organic. We react. All of us go to a theater. Well, no longer we do, but we would used to go to a theater. No matter where we came from, lived experiences, no matter what happened, we all came to the same place, watched the same movie. And while some of us are consuming it differently, we all are, there were points in the movie where we all laughed or cried. We were taken to the same journey of emotions by the producer of that movie, right? That's magic. We were literally manipulated together, no matter where we came from. That's what story does. So ask yourself, did he evoke the emotion? How do you know? If they're not crying at the end of the movie, you failed. Simple as that. If they're not crying at the end of the story, you failed. Go back, submit it again. Be empathetic with your audience. Be empathetic with yourself. Define the mission. Create new ideas. Ideate. Prototype it. Test it again. Test it again. It's a cycle. It never ends. And that's, in a nutshell, how I've been doing my storytelling for about 4 years now. And now I go all over the world to teach this method because people have gotten hungry to understand why we do different things at Microsoft today, how we do them differently, and how our brand has changed so much, transformed really. It's transformed me. It's made me more empathetic. And it's truly, it comes from the heart. So remember, I'm going to skip this real quick. Remember that if it doesn't have a character, a plot, and conclusion, it's not a story. So it has to have those 3 elements. Stories are for your audience, not to them, meaning you're going to take time to craft them, not just tell them. You're going to design stories. You're going to find ways to best tell it. Ideation is key. And lastly, you got to do it with your heart. You got to do it with your heart. Authenticity is key. Vulnerability is key, and that comes from empathy. You got to learn to be empathetic with yourself. All right, I'll pause here. I'll stop sharing, and I'll take questions.
So I'll go ahead and start. I have a question. Can you share with us one of your successful projects? Just maybe the background and what you created?
Absolutely. One of them is called Operationalizing the Cloud. It's a project that I did with an engineer who was employee number 70 at Microsoft. So he has a great story. And he was having a really hard time. He became a cloud engineer, which was a new product for him, right? He'd been there for so long. He was an on-premises operations engineer. And so for him, when I began to kind of groom him for the stories, they're not immediately responsive, right? I have to spend time with them and kind of warm up to them, and they have to warm up to me. And that's a hard thing to do with engineers. So it took a little while to kind of warm up. And then finally, when I did, I realized that he was going through his own personal transformation while Microsoft was going through the digital transformation. So I asked him questions around his personal journey. Being a veteran, what did that mean? Was he fearful that at any time he would lose his job because he didn't have the chops to be a cloud engineer? I mean, who was a cloud engineer? That didn't exist before. And of course he did. He was very vulnerable. He became very, very vulnerable. And the story was originally going to be one blog. It turned out into a 6-part series blog because so much content came from that of his own personal journey. Engineers that listened to him. So I actually it was a ghost blog. I wrote it, but it was him and, front and center. And people were just elated to learn from this veteran Microsoft engineer that he had been having these feelings of, vulnerability and was just scared about the future, what that meant for his job. And so many people outside of Microsoft were feeling the same. So it was an insane emotional response to his story. And now he became a writer. So he's actually one of our writers. So it's a great story because never would you think that an engineer would enjoy the process so much. I mean, he was not immediately bought into the storytelling, and then he just learned. He dresses up the part. He takes pictures now, and he's just kind of a celebrity in his own space, and people love him because he learned how his story impacted so many people, and it was so real. So
thanks, I appreciate that. Would you mind sharing this website where we can
look? Absolutely. So IT Showcase, Microsoft IT Showcase. So here you'll see all of the stories that are shared at Micro. It's an open source, and it's, again, it's for engineers, by engineers, for engineers. So it's definitely not movie style Hollywood stories, obviously. If you're an engineer, you'll probably enjoy it, but this is where all the content lives. It's evergreen content.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Miri, it looks like there are two questions in the chat, if you can see those.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, let me see. I'd like to know how you take a large amount of information about an organization and determine the story to tell. What if there are many stories? Okay, we'll stop there. So there's always going to be many stories. Let's take Microsoft, right? Microsoft is a global company. We have products that go from anywhere from Xbox to cloud services and enterprise services. We have a breadth of customer base that goes from, you know, teenagers, Xbox players, tweens, all the way to IT pros, right? Middle age. There's just an array of customer base and products and services that we serve. So the way you start is definitely by ensuring that your mission amasses all of where you want to be. For us, again, we changed it to every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. Our story was dedicated to everyone. And so you see yourself there. And that's important. You're not left out of the story. Look at your mission, look at your brand mission. When you think about that and you look at your mission, does the customer see themselves in that story? Do they see the product instead? If they see the product, the story is not about them, they're not going to tune in the same way. They're gonna be like, okay, they're going to try to sell me something. If I see myself in the story, I tune in. So it was very magical for Microsoft to say, we empower every person and every organization. That includes you and me. We're all in the same, we're all part of the Microsoft story. And so now I tune in differently. And the way that plays out, it's through different stories. Clearly a story through an Xbox player is going to look a lot different than it is to the IT pro, right? So now we have a lot of storytellers at Microsoft. We have over 4,000, if you didn't know, 400 in Seattle, and they're all spread out in the different functional areas. So we have businesses across, you know, all these areas in marketing, in finance, and all the support businesses, in HR. They're all telling different stories that all tie back to the main story of empowerment. So they all tie back to the feeling. Is the story empowering our customer, whatever that customer is in that pocket? Is the story empowering to the 12-year-old Xbox player? Is the story empowering to the IT pro? And so the empowerment, the feeling, that universal truth is what we're talking about. So the way you do that is you define that universal truth, and you can tell many stories from that universal truth. Could you share what problem you were trying to solve by telling the story of a cloud engineer? Was employee comms? No. So this was actually for engineers, from engineers at Microsoft to our partners. So we deal with a lot of different engineer partners. So it was B2B, business to business. And these engineers are also, we are selling them our solutions, but we were also testing them internally. So we were basically kind of eating what we call eating our dog food. We were implementing new solutions of like enterprise cloud, what we call the intelligent cloud services. And so as we were creating these solutions, we were also implementing them internally at Microsoft. So we were able to then actually sell it to other people. And so as we started to do this, we realized there was gaps. I mean, when we moved our own data from on-premises to the cloud, there were some gaps there that, you know, that we had to create some solutions and workarounds. So those are the stories that we began to tell. Hey, in our own process, we messed up a little bit here, or this something happened, whatever. And so if that was happening in our space, obviously it could have happened in their space when they began to implement in their digital revolution in their own space. And so these are the kind of stories that we told open source, which we had never done before. We'd never done something like this at Microsoft. So in other words, what is the mission of your storytelling? What's the goal? How did it work? The end results? My two questions are related to the example you gave earlier. Okay, yeah, so the mission of the story, so I want to clarify here, there's two types of missions, and sometimes they make sense to be the same. Sometimes it doesn't, so I'll explain. In my book, I talk about this. Disney's mission, the brand, is a terrible mission statement. You will never remember it. It's bland, it's blah, it's like you're like, these are the most creative people on the planet and this is their mission statement. Like I fell backwards when I connected with like our Disney, the people that I was talking to. And I was like, this is you guys? Somebody did not think of creating a better mission statement. But it doesn't matter. Because at the end, Disney has lived on nostalgia. Nostalgia is their universal truth. We all have a story about Disney. And so my kids, who are now teenagers, they were introduced to the brand way before they had a chance to look it up and Google it and find some YouTuber talking about it, right? Disney has already existed, and I already introduced them to the brand. Most of us have not been introduced the way Disney has, right? We have not existed in that same space of nostalgia and family and happiness and stories. Disney provides this at many different levels. Not many brands do. And so the mission of Disney, it's not the same mission of their story. Their story is to make people happy. This was a quote by Walt Disney, and you absolutely associate happiness with Disney. It's the happiest place on earth. Happy, happy, happy. So the feeling is happy. So they don't have to say this is our mission and this is our story mission. They can have it separate because they have established themselves as a brand for many years. Now, for Microsoft, it made sense that we actually changed our story and our mission. It was both. Our story was definitely the PC. It was all about our product. That was also our mission. When we decided to change our story began to be about people, not our product. And our mission changed because of that. So we could have stayed with the same mission. Ideally, a PC in every desk in every home, it did empower people. It empowered the world, right? It did what it was supposed to do. You could say the Surface now. You could say Microsoft products, on every desk in every home. That still serves us. But we changed it according to our story. We said our story needs to be a little bit different, needs to be about people now. So we also changed the mission. How did employees take this changing mission? Great question. It served us that our leader, Satya, started this. He started talking about empathy. He wrote a book about his own story. It's called Hit Refresh. He gave us all a copy. And it was really empowering to all of us to learn his personal story. He came out and truly just put himself out there talking about his own personal shortcomings as a person. And I thought, wow, that's incredible for a CEO to start with that, to start with his shortcomings. He told a story that I was very shocked when he told it. He said that he was applying for a job within Microsoft, and he wanted this job really bad. And the hiring manager said, you have the skill sets, but I have one question for you. And he said, okay. He goes, if you see a baby on the floor, if you're walking by, you see a baby on the floor crying, what do you do? And he's like, what do you mean? And so he was shocked that this was a question for, his interview. And he's like, what do you mean? He goes, I'm asking you the question. If you were walking by in the street and you saw a baby on the floor, what would you do? He was crying. And he says, I don't know. I'll call 911. I'll call for the mom. He goes, no, you'd pick it up. And he failed the interview. He says, you need empathy. And so he learned the lesson of empathy for leadership. And that began to lead with empathy. So that was something that he started with, and he shared. It was a very personal story he shared with us. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Somebody who's taking the leadership of our company and now is leading with empathy, and he's sharing this perspective. So for us, it was a change that continues to be, by the way, of transformation from the inside out. And I think for me specifically, as I went through my own personal story, I needed to be in a company where I myself aligned to those core values. When I looked at my own values and I said, yes, this is where I want to be. I want to attach myself. I want to give my time and effort. I want to show up every day here. And I'll stop real quick. I'm actually going to share with you. It became, our mission became something that not only do we know and recite because it's easy to say, but it's in the back of our badge, right? Every time I swipe, I'm reminded why I go to work every day, right? And that's important. Every time we talk at Microsoft, the mission is forefront, it's center, our story's there, it's continuing. Every time you hear our CEOs, our leaders speak, to empower every person and organization on the planet will always be the mantra. So it was an internal approach. It was a culture activator. Our mission became that. So the change continues to happen. There's a lot of change management, but I can say, 6 years later, we're most definitely a complete different company than we were before. I was part of the Bomber days. It was a space where it was ruthless. It was, sales, bottom line. And it was good. In this space, it needed to be. We needed to enter the market differently, but it was ruthless. And now we are people-centered. And that means, when I come to work and I badge in, every person means my coworker. Every person means not just my customer. And I need to empower them. As a leader, I need to empower my team. That's how we live this story. How did you employ change management to keep people aboard, to move from product to people? No, I'm gonna be honest. We had two schools. We had a school of newcomers who embraced the mission right away. We had a school of old timers that were not so happy about this change, right? They liked stuff. Don't move my cheese, right? It was like, this is good. It worked for so many years. Microsoft has been long-standing, and so it was a blend. And in that blend, it continues to be, honestly. But in a blend, we did lose some people, some leadership that just didn't attain to that mission, and that's okay. We don't want them anyway, right? If they're not going to show up and be empathetic, that's okay. But in that whole change management, you see people self-reflect. So I did. As a leader, I went in and I thought, how empathetic am I? This is even, like, I never even thought to think of this. So I took that test. I learned I wasn't. And so I began to work on it. And I think it just forced a self-reflection. That's what story does. And that's what's important. It's like, you can't force culture. It just grows because everyone wants to be a part of that culture. You kind of set the platform and you say, this is where we're going to start. And so Satya did. He says, this is where we're going to start. And whoever wants to get on this platform, let's do it. And if not, that's okay, right? So those of us who have jumped in, again, it's clearly a path. It's a journey where we're still at it, and I don't think it'll ever stop. But things that we have done differently, and now that I'm in recruiting in HR, we had last year the biggest diverse class ever at Microsoft of interns. This year we beat that number again. We are intentionally changing the school mindset, and we're intentionally activating culture in different ways. And I'm very proud to be part of this company. Would you feel comfortable sharing your story about when you were bullied? Yeah, how I handled it. Man, I handled it bad. I actually wanted to leave. So yeah, I'll share my story. So I started at Microsoft. Microsoft just called me. I was working here. I was in Miami working at a tech company, and the phone rang and I answered it, and it was Microsoft. So I was like, okay. And I didn't even know that they had an office here in Fort Lauderdale. And so I answered the phone and like, yeah, so-and-so from Microsoft, we want to talk to you. We have a job for you. And I was like, you're kidding me? Like, this is crazy. So they hired me, and I came into the LATAM office headquarters in Fort Lauderdale. It's about 30 miles from Miami. And I was so excited. I mean, I talk about imposter syndrome. I was like, I don't even know how they got my name. I don't belong here. I didn't go to the best schools, and I felt immediately that I don't know who gave my name, but it was just a miracle that I was at this incredible company. And so, of course, I was at my best. I showed up, I was excited. And actually, when I share my story, I often share a picture of me when they like my profile picture, because I was just like, Microsoft, I had like great smile. And that smile lasted me like a week, right? Because like literally a week later, 4 women within the LATAM organization that I worked with, they began to just be really mean to me, really mean. They would say things. So the first one was, we went to lunch. It was like the welcome lunch. And I don't know why it means so much for Latinos, but they often ask, where did you go to school? Like your university. That's like always a thing. It's a status, right? And so I was like, well, I went to community college, and so they're like, oh, I was like, well, then I transferred, and I just didn't know. I was like, what does that even matter? We're all at this table. Like, what? So I just began that whole thing of like, kind of dissecting me and how I just didn't belong there with the people that had gone through the great schools. And I was just like, well, clearly I feel already like I don't belong. This lasted a year. I gave myself a year. I told myself, I'm not going to let this, kind of like intrude in my opportunity at Microsoft. I'm going to give myself the chance. But honestly, after a year, I was pretty done. I walked up one day. They had, I can't tell too much detail because then it'll expose them, but they had done something specific. I walked in to the office and I saw this thing at my desk and I lost it. That was it. So I grabbed my laptop. We had like an open space thing so they could see me coming in and out. So I walked in, I saw this thing. I had my laptop in and I just grabbed it and I said, okay, I quit. That's it, I quit. They were all there. So they heard me. I was like, I quit. And I walked away. And I was quitting. And this program manager grabbed me by my arm. He shoved me in a conference room and he said, you're not quitting. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm quitting. I'm done. I'm out, And he was like, no, you're not. And I was like, why not? He goes, you need to go home. You need to sleep this over. You need to think about it. And you need to come back tomorrow because Microsoft needs you. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Microsoft doesn't. What doesn't, what? What are you talking about? They don't need me. I don't need them. It's clear. I'm done. He goes, you need to just go to sleep and come back tomorrow. So I did. I went home, had a really bad day. I literally walked out saying I quit. I talked to the GM. I'm like, I'm done. And I left. And I got home and had a bad day. And then I thought about what he said. And I said, well, Microsoft, how does Microsoft need me? What does that mean? Why would they need me? And I realized that if those women were bullying me, they were probably bullying other people. And they needed to hear my story. There was a time where, you know, like at Microsoft where just people didn't speak up. So I came back the next day and I said, you're right. I'm going to stay and I'm going to tell my story. And I'm going to make sure that while I can't change the bullies, I can expose them and I could tell my story and could tell what happened and they'll know that they did this to me. And so I did. And as stories go, more people came forward. More people say, wow, I got bullied too, and I got bullied too, and I got bullied too. So now there was a force of people saying, we can't change the bullies, but we can be here, and now we belong. We do belong. You can't tell me not to belong. And that started a mentorship circle. It just became a force of people connecting with each other and not letting others bring you down, right? So it was a powerful thing. All right, do I have examples of failures? Oh gosh, yeah. Failures in personal brand. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can tell you the biggest one has been my testing on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn as my testing platform. I know it sounds crazy, but I do. And I failed a whole lot. I've put stuff on there that I'm just like, why did I do that? And then because I'm testing it, that's my testing platform. And so I failed a lot on LinkedIn. The more you do, so here's the thing. Failing doesn't make you a failure, it makes you a doer, right? So that means that you're doing things when you're failing. You're just not doing them right. So I just learned that. And so LinkedIn became a thing. And then at one time, I was like, something happened. A friend of mine passed, and it was a close friend. It was sudden. And so I was in Seattle coming to Miami. My friend was here. And I was, I don't know if you've ever had someone die suddenly, but you're just kind of fogged up in your head. You just don't know. You're like in a trance. And so I was at the Seattle SeaTac airport, getting to Miami, and I wasn't thinking. I don't know. I must have not even been listening. But the TSA agent was taking my bags, and I have pre-checks. So they had this new machine where you just kind of put it in this belt. It was the first time. I mean, I traveled so much. But this day, clearly my friend is dead. I'm just a mess. So I'm going through TSA, and the guy's speaking to me, but I'm not hearing him, right? And again, I don't know if you've ever been in that fog. You just don't hear things. So I walk through, and the guy's yelling at me, and I realize he's yelling at me. He must have been yelling for like 30 seconds. And so he gets in my face, this agent. He goes, "Do you speak English?" Right? And so I got shook, and I was like, "Oh, he's talking to me." And I started crying, right? I started crying, and I was like, yes, I do. I'm like, I just lost my friend, and I started crying. So I got on the plane, and literally right before the plane takes off, I get on LinkedIn to rant, right? So I tell the story, and I wasn't ranting about the TSA agent. I was ranting at the fact that, someone is so hurried that they don't see when someone else is going through something. We don't know what people are going through. So be kind. That was the message. So I got on the plane, I ranted on LinkedIn, as I was often doing in my time of testing. And by the time I landed, so it's 6 hours, I didn't get online. The thing that went viral, I had TSA checking on me and calling me and apologizing. And I was just like, what just happened? This whole video, this whole content just went viral. I mean, it was insane. And I learned how to do content from that. I learned that those stories hit home. I began to dissect the stories. So the failures told me how not to do it, and then the wins told me how to do it, and I've been maximizing that experience ever since. All right, your book, you write about sparkles as a way to draw attention to social activism, and I know we're running out of time. I see your hand, Anita. We'll do one more question. Okay, you were good? Yeah? Okay. In your book, you write about sparkles as a way to draw attention to social activism. Yes. Can you speak a little more about that and give us an example of sparklines? Yeah. So sparklines is a method to tell stories, is what we call techniques. So just like the hero's journey, monomyth, the mountain, sparklines is a way that you can kind of tell an idea here, an idea there, an idea here, and you're actually talking about different stories that at the end connect one big theme. And I talk about social activism because social activism has different entanglements, right? I think that word is like a thing right now, but it has different tentacles. Social activism can be seen from many different places. And so as a brand, I talk in my book about no longer do we not have a stance. Corporations have to say where they stand with social activism. Customers are demanding this. And so Sparklines as a method allows corporations to plug in different sparks, different ideas of stories to talk about their social activism. For example, for us, AI services, we have AI for good. We have a lot of stories around AI for good. And so AI for good is activism around our environment, activism around how we're using AI services to create sustainable forces, sustainable, negative carbon footprint as a corporation. So we use all these different ideas and stories that at the end, clearly Microsoft stands to make money, right? That's the end goal. But we are going beyond that, and we're serving and we're activating different places for social activism, for the social responsibility. And so Sparklines is just one way. I also talk about different ways. There's like 8 that I mentioned in the book. Again, there's more. And the idea around that is you have to have your core values as a personal brand and also as a corporate brand. You have to have your own set of values and what you stand for in your stances. And you have to be ready to defend those and to share those, and to, people will ask you. People will be like, hey, do you stand for what do you stand for? And now that's a thing. It's part of your brand. It's no longer staying quiet, also sends a message. So you have to truly define what that's going to be for you, your core values, and be able to create that. Sparklines for me, I've used in many levels. So I use social activism for women. Then I get into women in tech. Then I get into Latina women in tech. There's 3 layers of that. There's intersectionality, right? And so the stories are different. When I talk to Latino women, my stories are a lot different because they come from Latin places. They know what I'm talking about. There's a story of immigration. There's a story of hardship. When I talk to women in general, it's a different story. So it serves in different areas in what we call the intersectionality of stories. You're welcome. I'm glad that you asked about the story about bullying. It was hard. It was one of those things that you don't want to share, and then you share and it's like out there. And once you share it, you know that other people went through it. So that's the power of story.
All right, Miri, you're doing wonderful. I just want to pop in and say that we have about 6 minutes left of our comm leads. So folks, if you have any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to share, please, this is your moment to do it. Yeah, but we've got time. We've got 6 minutes.
We've got time. Okay. I didn't realize how much time. I wasn't counting. I'm sorry. I typically do, but I'm glad that you're moderating. Thank you.
Oh no, you're totally fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have another question. Miri, what is it that you were doing that caught Microsoft's attention when you were in Miami working for another company?
Oh, it's a great question. I was always hustling on the side, and I think Microsoft recognized it. And I do tell everyone to do the same thing. Don't marry companies. You can date them all you want. Let them take you out. You take them out and have a good time. But that's not your boyfriend. That's not your, that's not your husband. That's not long term. Because when they want to get rid of you, they will. And when you want to get rid of them, you will. And so it's a contract. And so part of me building my brand was that place of me understanding, if my company was not there right now, where would I be? And getting out of that system. I started working when I was 16, as soon as I could legally. Clearly, we didn't have any money. I had to put myself through school. My sisters did the same. We were always cooperating with the house. So it was just, you come from a place of, you have nothing and you're building this American dream. And so you're hustling, and you're having multiple things happening at the same time. Microsoft recognizes that ability that you have they respect it, right? They respect the hustle, and they recognize what I was doing. I was at the time starting to share stuff on social media, and they took notice. They took notice of the things that I was talking about. They actually did the same with our chief storyteller, Steve Clayton, who began to blog. He did us at the tech blog in UK. He came from the UK, and so they were like, oh, he's good. He's talking about tech. He's amassing an audience here and there. Let's bring him in. And so I had an audience. I began to build an audience. And so they saw that influence, and they were like, we want to use that. we want to leverage that and give me the platform. So it worked out really nicely because, you know, as a platform, it serves me and then it serves them. And so I became a brand ambassador. And, you know, now it's even better when I talk about students, right? I know I'm old, but I'm relevant still a little bit. So it's something that people go, wow, Miri, I never imagined people like you worked at Microsoft, right? Like they always think engineers are the ones. So like, oh, that's all the people. Engineers are actually pretty cool people as well. I'm like, you just don't know them yet. I'm like, tell them to tell you a story. They're pretty good. They're just really shy. So people began to get curious about the humans of IT, the humans of Microsoft. And I was already out there being a human. So as they made a shift in brand, they just began to bring people in that were living that out already.
What were you blogging about at that time?
Everything, just everything. There was nothing specific. It was kind of lifestyle. I didn't realize I was a writer, to be honest. I went to school, I have communications, but I never saw myself as a writer. I never thought I would even write a book. And so it was just writing things, ranting. I would just rant about things. I would write letters to politicians, like open letters and things like that. And so it was more of like, what's she doing, and let's bring her over here and see what she's about, you know. So they got curious, and that was really cool. I was very impressed by the shift. It was an active shift in bringing people new school of thought.
That's a great story too.
Yeah. My niece has a question here.
I just wanted to say, like, you seem really confident. You felt like you've got what you like doing, and I'm going into my freshman year of college, and I just want to know, like, what your advice would be, or what something you wish you knew going into college.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to tell you something that it's going to serve you for the rest of your life. The first thing is you will never have it put together, and it's okay. You will never, there's never a threshold where you go, I made it. You never made it. You're always going to be like, there's one more thing. Imposter syndrome is real, but you can tell it to shut up. You tell it to shut up. That's what it is. You just be like, every time it comes up and creeps up, when you get into college and you don't feel like you should be there, you're there. You already made it. You're in. So tell it to shut up. Okay, if it tells you you don't belong here, no, yes I do. I'm here. This is where I am. Take your seat at the table. So those two things will serve you, because there's going to be a lot more. The more responsibility you get, the bigger the job. I always think about like CEOs and presidents. Nobody told, you know, they never had experience, right? They got to have imposter syndrome too. Like they just showed up and now they're like a president or a CEO of a company. And so we all are figuring it out, and that's part of the journey. It's not confidence. It's more of letting loose and saying, you know, it is what it is. I'm not gonna it won't get better than this. This is all I got to give. Do your best, and that's it. And literally forget the rest. You're gonna get haters all the time. The delete and block button are probably going to become your best friends on social media. They've been mine. And if you have your core set of values, this is where stories are good, because if you have a target audience, you empower yourself to connect with them, and that's it. You know, when I out of the story of bullying, I created an audience for my mentorship, and it was young women in tech. Women coming out of college, and I began to talk to them and mentor them. And so when I started doing my test on LinkedIn, oh my gosh, I got so many haters. And so they would send me direct messages, and I would spend so much time going, oh, what did I do? And then I realized those were not my audiences. Those were other people I wasn't targeting. So I started to delete them. I'm like, who are you and why? Thanks for stopping by, but you know what I mean? Like, you don't belong here. So you begin to empower yourself, and that's important, because it's rough out there. It's rough, and I can't even imagine, like when I was in college, we didn't have that kind of social media ground. Today you do, and so it's always top of mind. So you have to learn to manage it. Tell imposter syndrome to shut up, and tell other people to shut up when they don't belong in your space. That's it.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. How have I managed to juggle personal brand and creating content for yourself with the create for Microsoft? Yeah. So how do I manage my brand with Microsoft? Well, I learned again that Microsoft is a part of who I am, not who I am. It doesn't define me. And so I have been able to blend both. And I think that's what they liked about me, that I brought that authenticity to Microsoft. So it didn't sound Microsoft. It was Miri from Microsoft. So, and that's what they were trying to do, kind of break down the content. We used to have the same language, the same, thing, corporate lingo. And now you see a lot more Microsoft tees out there and just sharing stuff and being themselves. And so you don't really juggle it, you blend it. Microsoft is part of me, I'm part of it until we part ways. And so I do this, and I'm also a mom and sister, I'm a friend, I'm all these things, and these are all part of my brand. And so sometimes and I do that for different channels as well. So on Twitter, I'm more Microsoft T, because there's a lot of my content there. There's a lot of tech people there. Instagram is dedicated completely to my girls. So I'm always like, queen, doing all this queen stuff. And imposter syndrome, I talk to them. There's my girls. If anybody else wants to follow me, that's great. If you don't, that's good. That's not for you. And then LinkedIn is, like I said, it's where I test everything. So you're going to get everything from me on LinkedIn. I go on LinkedIn Live when I'm on vacation. I mean, I just test everything. And so it's been crazy, because one day I woke up and I had like all these followers. I was like, why are they following? Like, I'm a total normal person doing nothing, and they're just following. Like, people get curious about your stories. So I'm just myself, and that involves Microsoft, which is part of me.
All right, Miri, thank you so much for being a part of here. For the folks in the chat, go ahead and send your virtual claps, however way you'd like to do it. Thank you for being here and sharing with us your story and how one defines a story. I think that's really important too. This would not have been possible without Marisol. So folks, don't forget to send her props as well.
Thank you, Marisol.
Yeah, Miri, thank you so much. Any final words that you want to leave us with? And then I can hit the stop record button.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If I didn't get to, sorry, Marisol, you want to say something?
I was going to say thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I just want to say again, it's always an honor to share stories and connect with all of you. If you want to connect with me, I do spend time with people online. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, anywhere, any channel, I'm available. If you have a question you don't want to ask here, feel free to ask it, direct message, and I'll do my best to get to it. This week is going to be crazy for me as we go into intern day tomorrow, but I'll get to it eventually. And I promise you, I do spend time. I proudly say I respond to every message, as crazy as it gets on social media. So I'll be glad to connect with you if you want to. So I'm actually going to put my my handle there for Instagram and Twitter. And somebody put my LinkedIn already. So there it is.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Don't forget that next week's Our Comm Lead will be on. There will be a cooking segment on Wednesday with Sarah Bland making mac and cheese. So I'll link up the calendar onto the chat, and then of course our usual social hour on Thursday. And we don't have a topic for that yet, but please come and join and hang out, and we will have a topic by then. So thanks again, Miri. Thanks again, Marisol. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.